How can the youth remain adequately protected against the risk of a future loss of income? We find out now, and now this is obviously ahead of the Youth Day celebrations taking place in South Africa. And Nicholas van der Nest, he's a Director for Risk Product Innovation at Liberty. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I was reading through the release, and the harsh realities really stuck out for me because it was a bit of a shocker as to how harsh the current landscape when it comes to employment and unemployment and even retrenchment in the South African environment is for individuals who are under the age of 35. You've got some interesting numbers to quote there for loss of income.
So we do our claim statistics at every year, and basically last year we paid about 3 billion in claims. A significant proportion of that was for loss of income claims. And specifically when we start digging more into our loss of income type claims, we find that the majority of these claims are paid for people under the age of 35. So around half of those claims are for people under the age of 35. It's really mainly driven in that age group by retrenchments. Our income protection product has a retrenchment component in it. And in terms of number of claims, we've just seen a massive increase in that over the last couple of years. Which
is scary, because for anyone under the age of 35, you think they're young, the world is their oyster, they can find employment opportunities at any time. But the reality is that it takes, what, more than 6 months at times to find another job?
I think it goes wider than that. I mean, any person under the age of 35 really should be thinking that the world is my oyster. And I think generally, when you are younger, you don't consider all of the risks that you could face in terms of earning an income. I mean, those risks are not only retrenchment, they also talk about accidents or other kind of disability, which leads to you never being able to earn an income going forward. You know, in the insurance industry, we always say that your biggest asset is your ability to earn a future income. When you are young, that ability to earn the future income is at its highest. But when we look at retrenchments, you know, generally, I don't know, some companies say they've got a first in, first out principle, others say last in, first out. You don't really know nowadays, but certainly what we've seen is just more and more companies are actually restructuring their workforces.
So now we've identified that clearly this is some kind of product that everybody who is employed, especially if you're under the age of 35, needs. But maybe if you tell us about the nuances about these typical products, because there's disability cover, retrenchment cover, loss of income. How does it all tie in, and more importantly, how does it work?
So an income protection product at its very basic will cover your monthly income should you be unable to work because you are disabled. So you could insure up to 100% of your post-tax income for the first 2 years. So for the first 24 months of being disabled, you could get your full income back. Thereafter, it generally drops to about 75%. So that's in the case of being occupationally disabled or actually unable to perform your job. These products, I mean, the newer generation products, and Liberty has one of those, would then also start including other kind of definitions in there. So, for example, the Liberty version has a retrenchment product which you can add on as an option. That retrenchment product would cover up to 75% of your income for 6 months if you were to be retrenched.
So it goes back to sitting down with a consultant, reviewing your risk profile and what you can afford as a bolt-on to all these additional products.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, generally people get put off by the price of a benefit. When it comes to retrenchment cover, we always say, at least make sure that you've got the house, so the bond, the car payment, and your kids' school fees paid. The other things, yes, okay, maybe it might be financially tough on you for a while, but at least you've got that money to carry you through the worst.
I'm happy you touched on cost, Nicholas, even though you can only give us Liberty's perspective. But if there's an average, or rather you know, the basics, if one had to get minimal cover, you know, what kind of costs are we looking at from a South African environment?
So it generally becomes quite difficult to estimate cost, because we look at your age, your socioeconomic status, and various other factors when we determine the price that you should be paying. So for a general income protection product, it's difficult to give you a price as to how much you should be paying. When it comes to retrenchment cover, that's usually at a flat rate. So our retrenchment cover is 90 rands per 10,000 rands per month.
Sure.
So It doesn't sound like that much, but you know the value that it gives you is significantly more than the 90 rands.
Just to close off with, Nicholas, the level of education, because it seems that there are some people who aren't even aware that these kind of products are available on the market, and others who are, but tend to prioritize other expenses versus insurance, which tends to be a grudge purchase for consumers.
So I think generally most people believe that their employer actually has cover for them in place. And the reality is that fewer and fewer employers actually have proper group life benefits or income protection benefits in place for their workforce. You know, obviously it costs a lot of money to be putting something like that in place. And what I would recommend is just at least look at what you've got. So just ask the question. We tend to try very hard to do educational campaigns on what kind of cover you should have, or even just what cover is available. But I think that generally, especially in younger people, there's a very little understanding of what these products do.
Sure. Well, we certainly hope we have been able to change that in the 5 minutes that we've been on air. Thank you so much for your time today and giving us the honest and hardcore realities with regard to income protection and why it's needed in South Africa, especially for the youth. Thank you so much to Nicholas van der Nest. He's the Director for Risk Product Innovation at Liberty.